It's good to be with you on CPAC Live. I'm Dan Schneider, the Executive Director of ACU. We've got 75 days or so before the next presidential election, and we just got some wild information. The governor of New Jersey is mailing ballots to every single New Jersey voter, every single one. What is disturbing is that every single one of these voters can cast their mail-in ballot and then the very next day show up at a polling station and cast another ballot. And there's nothing that can be done. Instead, we have to just trust that these good people who have spent all their time trying to remove a duly elected president from office, that we'll just trust them not to break the law. We'll just trust them not to do what is illegal, but impossible to catch. So what could go wrong? Well, we've got two guests who are going to help us understand what could go wrong, because it already has gone wrong. We've got Gordon Chang, who is both an ACU board member and a well-known writer and TV commentator from America. And we've got Beng Mao, who is one of the best-known writers, critics, and thought leaders in South Korea. They have studied the Korean elections that took place just in April 15th. And by all accounts, the president, the radical left-wing president of South Korea, stole the election. Beng Mao, could you please tell us what happened?
Yeah, in short, a very sophisticated set of a computer server and QR code and a Huawei firewall and a very sophisticated server-grade ballot counting machine, electronic counting machine. These things were used to, how can I say, fabricated or steal about 7 to 10% of the vote during the universal early voting. It is suspected.
I want to just interrupt you there. 7 to 10% of the vote was stolen in this nationwide election.
It is suspected by a U.S. professor, a very famous doctor, Dr. Walter Bain.
Right. If our viewers are interested, Dr. Walter Bain at the University of Michigan did this work. He doesn't know anything about Korean politics. He doesn't know anything about Korean policy. He is a numbers guy, and he monitors elections all over the world, thousands of elections he's monitored.
That's right.
So he got the data sets from the Korean election, and to his amazement, it was 7 to 10% of the election was stolen.
That's right.
Beng Mao, you mentioned Huawei. Gordon Chang, you are somebody who knows what Huawei is about more than almost anybody else on this planet. Gordon, what did Huawei do? What are they capable of? And maybe we can also start thinking about what happened in Korea and how that might impact the U.S. election.
Yeah. Huawei Technologies is the world's leading maker of telecom equipment and is basically owned by China by 99%, 1% by a private individual. Huawei is China's instrument to dominate 5G, the fifth generation of wireless communications. More important for this purpose, China's used Huawei to surveil others around the world. And in this case, they've not only used it to surveil what was going on in South Korea, they used Huawei technology and servers to steal that 7 to 10% of the vote. So we believe that Moon Jae-in, the president of South Korea, worked with the Communist Party, worked with perhaps Tencent, which is a private Chinese company, and they worked also with Huawei Technologies. And that's how Beijing was able to develop this software that in the middle of an election changed 7%, 10% of the ballots.
Yeah, so Tencent, most Americans probably don't know that company, but Tencent owns TikTok, right?
Yes, that's right.
Tencent owns WeChat, which President Trump has put under ban. TikTok is owned by ByteDance, which is another Chinese company. ByteDance and Tencent are very similar. They are internet giants.
Well, sir, back to the Korean perspective. Why would President Moon Jae-in do this, and how did he do it? How did he work with the Chinese to get this done?
Actually, I don't have a very, concrete evidence. We don't. It is all kind of a suspicion right now. So I have to keep my reservation with regard to that. But still, like back in the back in the July of 2019, and I look like a Biden. Sorry, 2019,
Okay.
And the head of one of the key member of the ruling party went to Beijing and made a agreement with the Chinese Communist Party, and it's very strange. It is a policy partnership agreement. July 9, 2019 is by that time everybody knows that there's a civilization war between China and U.S. Is going to end up with the victory of U.S. It was very clear to almost everybody. And still, this guy went to Beijing.
And are you referring to Yang Jong-chul? Is he the individual? Well, he is notorious for being very pro North Korea and very anti-American. So he's the guy that the South Korean president sent to the Chinese Communist Party to work out this deal.
Yes, the ruling party sent him. He is the head of the ruling party's think tank, which is called the Democracy Institute.
Mm-hmm. So now the Chinese are involved in the Korean elections. They've got their hardware. Gordon, 5G, Huawei. What could go wrong in the U.S. elections here?
Well, what could go wrong is what we saw in South Korea, is that they manipulated electronic voting machines. Now, many U.S. votes are recorded on those electronic voting machines. So, for instance, the last time that I voted, 2016 presidential election, it was on an electronic machine. And what we're concerned about is that these machines, some of them have indirect links with Chinese equipment suppliers. And, with Beijing perfecting its techniques in South Korea, it could try something else. We worry about mail-in ballots, as you just point out. And by the way, I am from New Jersey. And one thing I'm going to do, Dan, is Lydia and I, my wife, we're going to actually go and get absentee ballots. We're going to fill them in. We're going to deliver them on the spot because we are concerned about election fraud. But sorry for that. But what China could do is, with those electronic machines, which are in New Jersey, they could just change votes like they did in South Korea. Remember, their software to do this in South Korea changed votes in the middle of an election. It figured out which elections, because there were 300 seats up for grabs on April 15th in the National Assembly. They figured out which seats they should try to change, which they could change, and they changed them instantaneously. So if they can do that in South Korea, why can't they do that in the United States? So we've got to be extremely concerned because we know that China's been thinking about our election infrastructure.
Well, Bing Mao,
yes,
we're going to put a picture up on the screen where bundles of ballots were put in like kiosks, voting kiosks in Korea, and every single one of these ballots were voted for the ruling party. Obviously, there was additional voting fraud that didn't relate to high technology. It was just straight rampant fraud. Can you explain how that would have happened in Korea?
You mean, yeah, it is essentially it is a very high-tech electronic kiosk. We Koreans do have a very accurate resident registration, very, very accurate one, and they are using it. And so everybody can, anybody can go to one of the polling places, which is about 4,000 all over the country. Mm-hmm. Not to his address, not to the one which is in his address. No, any place. So it is actually a kiosk. Still, it provides you with paper ballots. Mm-hmm. So it gives you a false feeling that it is a real, conventional, traditional voting. But essentially, it is electronic voting.
Well, in some respects, it actually sounds a little bit like what the New Jersey governor's doing and what other governors here in America are talking about doing. Just sending out, you'll get something in the mail, it's paper, and you can vote it. But what if you've got 5 people in your family and you get 5 ballots? Or what if you're in a house, you've moved into a house and you get a whole bunch of ballots, from other apartment owners in the house? And I mean, Gordon, how are we going to prevent this kind of fraud that we saw in Korea just in April?
Yeah, mail-in ballots are really an invitation for fraud, and especially with what we've seen in prior elections in this country, this is not some theoretical concern. I just want to mention, in South Korea, this was an election for the National Assembly. The National Assembly, in the first instance, gets to approve a constitution. Moon Jae-in is just 3 votes short of being able to get a constitutional amendment through the National Assembly. And the reason why this is important is because if Moon can do what he wants, he probably would do away with the Republic of Korea, South Korea. He'd merge it into North Korea. Because of this fraud, he's only 3 votes short of being able to end the existence of South Korea. That's why this fraud is so consequential. And of course, Dan, November 3, this election is so consequential for the United States. So China clearly has the incentive to change the election results as they did in South Korea, and as I'm sure they're going to try and do in the United States.
Well, we started this segment off explaining that what happened in Korea could be a precursor to what could happen in our own elections. Bing Mao, how are the Korean people responding to all of this evidence of fraud?
Actually, this government is totally controlling every sector of the media, and shamefully, the Korean learned people, the intellectuals, are not strong enough. So, actually, those people like me who are criticizing before the election and after the election, there's a system. Before the election, I criticized the system itself, and after the election, I raised the issue of election rigging. And these people are prosecuted. For me, I'm being prosecuted,
Right.
because they say that I instigated election crime, organized election crime, for criticizing the system.
Right.
And
For asking questions.
So we are being marginalized. Still, there are lawyers, and still there are activists. Still, there are big demonstrations against this election rigging, but it's an uphill struggle.
Well, Bing Mao, I hope that this University of Michigan professor who crunched all the numbers and shows that and I think the language he says is that, in fact, I can quote, there are anomalies that strongly suggest